Ladies and gentlemen, a very good evening to you and welcome to the latest in our series of new Arab debates, coming to you this time from the Jordanian capital, Amman. Like it or not, what happens in Egypt impacts in the rest of the region. It always has. So what of the last 3 years, inspiring or disappointing? A generation of Egyptians still in search of an alternative to the old dictatorship, or did they simply replace it with a new one? And what does the turmoil say about the region's political future? When the dust finally settles, which way will it be facing, forwards or back? Perhaps we'll get some answers to those questions as we debate the motion, Egypt is a disappointment to the rest of the Arab world. As always, our two speakers have very different opinions on the subject. But before I introduce them, let me just say for the benefit of our television audience that we took a vote before we came on air. We'll take another one at the end of the debate. We'll then compare the two and see to what extent our speakers have been able to change your mind. Speaking for the motion, Manar Rashwani, he's op-ed editor and columnist at Jordan's daily newspaper Al-Ghad. He was director of research at the Al-Arab Daily in Qatar and is a former Atkin Fellow at the International Centre for the Study of Radicalization at King's College in London. Speaking against the motion, Hani Al-Mulki is a member of the Jordanian Senate and has been both Foreign Minister and Minister of Industry and Trade, other ministries, of course. He also served as Jordan's ambassador to Egypt and helped negotiate the country's peace treaty with Israel. Ladies and gentlemen, that's our panel. Manar Rashwani, let me start with you. You're disappointed with Egypt. You say it's because the opposition, made up of leftists and liberals, betrayed the ordinary people. Why did they do that?
No, actually, to be honest, we should blame all political parties and groups after the revolution of 2011, because it's about the mentality that dominated the struggle between different political groups in Egypt. Thus, at the beginning, we can blame the Islamists, of course, who excluded everybody when they came to power.
You singled out the opposition. What was the opposition supposed to do when the Muslim Brotherhood broke its promises one by one and took over the state increasingly?
Yes,
what was the opposition supposed to do?
The opposition, instead of coming together and get united, they tried hard to create excuses for the army.
What was the National Salvation Front all about? This was opposition parties coming together.
Exactly.
Attempting to put their differences behind them.
Exactly, but what we saw after July 2013 is completely the opposite. Now we see exactly the opposite to the demands that the ordinary people were asking for. No freedom, no dignity, no social justice in Egypt at all.
But the country needed stabilization. When the leftists and the liberals called for the army to come in, the army was the only force in Egypt that could stabilize the country. It was falling apart. What else were they supposed to do?
Actually, what we see now in Egypt, not stability, actually. It's the opposite, completely the opposite.
How can it be the opposite? Fuel queues have gone, the police are back on the streets, the power cuts have ended, the stock market rebounded, foreign money has come in. That looks pretty good, doesn't it?
Yes, exactly.
That's not exactly room for disappointment, is it?
Yes, but this is exactly what we call structural instability. This is what we call structural instability. You cannot send thousands to jail and say, we have no problems in Egypt. You cannot send people to put people on trial. And we witnessed in Egypt massive trials, unbelievable verdicts, and mass death sentences all the time. But this is not stability.
No, but what is happening is overwhelmingly approved by the majority of Egyptians. This is what they want. This is what they asked the army in to do, which was to impose some stability. That's what they got.
But to be honest, nobody knows.
The coup was wildly popular, Mr. Rashwani.
Yes, and the Islamists were popular also. We cannot say after 1 year.
Yeah, but the army remains popular. 70%.
We don't know, to be honest.
The latest opinion polls that we have say that the army is supported by at least 70% of the non-Muslim Brotherhood population.
Exactly, non-Muslim Brotherhood. But let's take, if we want to be more precise, let's take about the presidential election. Last time when Mr. Morsi won the election, 50% at least didn't participate in this election. So we cannot say that or the army is popular within, and the measures taken by the army is accepted. The last example, it's not about Muslim Brotherhood. Let's talk about 6 April movement. What happened? They are not Islamists. You cannot say they are terrorists, but you can also...
So but they disappoint you as well, do they? Everybody disappoints you in Egypt.
No, to be honest, no, not necessarily. I'm talking about the traditional opposition in Egypt. Here we need to we need to distinguish between 2 groups. Actually, we can blame ordinary people or the real rebels for not creating their own leaders. They allowed the traditional opposition, and this is important.
Yeah, but it takes time. They didn't exactly have a history in which they could build up these opposition networks. They had to do it in a hurry.
Yes,
the revolution
exactly.
wasn't planned. It took place. It was spontaneous. Nobody had planned it.
Yes.
And these transitions take time. Give them time.
Okay, if we want to give them time, it's okay, but I'm not blaming them. I'm not blaming them, but in this case,
so what disappoints you most about Egypt today?
Actually, the traditional opposition, the mentality that led to the situation we see now. The opposition, the Islamists wanted to exclude everybody, and at the same time, what so-called liberals, leftists, and nationalists actually wanted just to create excuses to make the army intervene and to make a coup.
They didn't need to create the excuses. President Morsi put himself above the law. The famous declaration, November the 22nd, the decree, November the 22nd, 2012, made him the final power above those of the courts, above those of the constitutional court as well, made him the final power in the country. What else was the opposition supposed to do except call in the army? I come back to that.
I agree, but at the same time, what we see now, it's not about the Islamists and the others. We are talking about democracy in Egypt. We are talking about reform in Egypt.
We're talking about what people want in Egypt, aren't we? Isn't that the most important thing, what the majority of people want? They're about to vote wildly in favor
want repression.
of Field Marshal al-Sisi. They're going to vote for him.
Yes,
you know that. I know that. The audience knows it.
But they
Egypt
vote also,
knows it.
Before 1 year, they voted also for Morsi. You cannot say after 1 year they still support the army. And the last public opinion...
The army is still the most popular organization in the country. There's no doubt about that. Whether the figure's gone up or down, it remains the most popular in the country.
And this is very important.
That has to tell you something.
Why the army is still the most important institution in Egypt? This is a problem, not the opposite. Because if I were not able to create institutions, and I always want to rely on the army, this is a serious problem. In this case,
that's not the only reason the army is popular, is it, Mr. Rashwani?
I think
every family, almost every family, has somebody who serves in the army at one point.
But this is not enough because the poverty in Egypt is really high. And in this case, while the army controlling at least 40% of the Egyptian economy, so why these people who serve in the army don't get enough salary, don't get enough income, while the officers, the high-rank officers, get a huge amount of money because of their positions.
You're saying it's unfair. It's an unfair
Yes,
system.
definitely.
All right.
And it's not enough to be affiliated or to be a member in the army.
Rashwani, we'll leave it there. There'll be plenty of time for more questions. Thank you very much indeed. Ali Al-Mulki, you're against the motion.
Yeah.
You said it looks like Egypt is following the roadmap to reform, and you said you're confident that it succeed. What about the wholesale junking of human rights that's taken place in Egypt over the last year? You think that's on the right road to reform?
This is to be contested, but what
How do you mean? What, contested in what way?
Contested because every single person that is being arrested goes to court. And the new constitution in Egypt had clearly made the judicial system independent.
Yes, 1,100 people got at least 2 days in trial before they got a death sentence. That was good, wasn't it?
No.
That's working well.
No, I can answer
well,
that.
The defense lawyers weren't even allowed in most of the hearings.
We can argue the sentence, but we cannot...
We can also argue the procedure.
No, we cannot argue the fact that these people killed people, that burnt churches.
You don't know that.
I do know that.
In the particular trials in which they were involved, you don't know that.
I can see that, and everybody saw that. Saw people being slaughtered in the streets. Saw the guns and the knives and the swords and the grenades in the sit-in
Dr. Al-Mulki,
in safe
so
Rabaa.
just try a few hundred people. Let's have a show trial, Soviet style, a few hundred death sentences, and everything will be fine.
Initial cohering. Now,
do you know what
I will tell you.
Let me just ask this something.
I will tell you what that resulted in.
Let me just ask you this. No, let me ask you this question. Dr. Al-Mulki, please, let me ask you this question.
In the streets of Egypt.
Let me ask you this question.
In the last 4 weeks, the violence rate had went down to zero.
You can shout. Dr. Al-Mulki, you can shout. But I'm coming to a question, and the question is, 11 Egyptian human rights organizations have condemned the usage of the judiciary as a tool to suppress the political opposition. Are you saying they don't know what they're talking about?
Yes, I am saying exactly.
They don't know what they're talking about.
No, they don't know what they're talking about.
And the UN doesn't know what it's talking about either.
Well, I will
they
have
condemn the lack of justice.
I can answer you. Look,
they said the trials did not meet the barest minimum for international justice. Those trials did not meet the barest minimal requirement for justice.
That is a primary court ruling. They still can appeal that. But I do understand that this court ruling had been positively echoed in the street, where we have not seen since the ruling till today any violence erupted there.
So mob justice is good. Mob justice is good. As long as the mob likes it, it's fine.
I'm talking about the notion.
As long as the mob likes it, it's fine. Just please the mob outside. That's okay, is it?
I'll explain that to you again. Don't you think if you make a decision and you save the lives of innocent people in the street and do not, and we have to wait and see if this ruling will be practiced, I am telling you, they have the right to contest that in court.
Dr. Al-Mulki, whose lives have been saved? We've seen 2,500 Egyptians have been killed, more than 17,000 wounded, more than 16,000 have been arrested in demonstrations and clashes since July the 3rd. Who's been protected by this army? 2,500.
All these numbers were not attacked by government or by innocent people. These numbers were attacked by people that refuse to understand that legitimacy is not only tied to time period, but to deeds. And once you violate your legitimacy, it becomes null and void. They refuse that.
Dr. Al-Mulki, the problem with that argument is that nobody's buying it. Nobody's buying it inside the country. Nobody's buying it outside the country either.
They bought it for Nixon and de Gaulle. Why can't they buy it for Morsi?
The government...
You know what's good?
Listen to what they're saying. Government repression is driving an expanding cycle of political violence. You know why? The government is driving political violence.
Because those who triggered change in Egypt, they triggered it from outside. And what
so now we're down to the argument about foreign hands involved.
Of course. They triggered it, and the Egyptian people carried their revolution.
They pushed the Egyptian people into the streets, did they? They didn't come spontaneously. They were told to come into the streets.
They triggered it. On the 25th, it was a trigger, and you have to understand that. They went to the streets on the 30th, when they had to protect their revolution and when they had to protect their independence. The Egyptians at that time refused to compromise their independence. They were pressured politically and economically during the second revolution, and they refused to give in.
Okay, I want to take you back.
And I will tell you one more thing.
One more thing,
yes.
Please. And then I have some questions for you.
Revolutions can be triggered from the outside.
Okay, Dr. Al-Mulki.
But the outside can never stop a revolution of the people.
Dr. Al-Mulki, I want to take you back to August last year when the military cleared 2 sit-ins by the Muslim Brotherhood. Human Rights Watch called it the most serious incident of mass unlawful killings in modern Egyptian history. And you think everything's going fine.
Yeah.
Hundreds of people, many of them unarmed, were killed. By the military.
I can answer that.
But you think that's fine? But all that is fine, is it?
No, I don't see that fine. But I see a problem
you see
in what they
saw. On the road to a successful reform.
I see a problem in the report. I don't say that's fine because that is not
Why are all these reports wrong? Everybody's saying the same thing.
Well, I don't see them
all the
say
international
that.
and the local organizations are saying the same thing.
I don't see that happening when Israelis kill Palestinians. I don't see
We're not talking about Israelis and Palestinians.
I am
We're
talking
about
about
Egypt.
organizations. These human watch
Can we
organizations.
just stay with the subject? Can we just stay with the subject?
I cannot take these human rights reports further than the end of this table. I cannot, because they are biased.
When have they been biased?
They have been always biased. I don't see them.
Give me an example of bias.
I just told you, I told you, and you said stay to the subject. I told you they have been biased in the killings that we see for the Palestinians.
And in the deep criticism that they've leveled at Egypt, at Israel?
It's not a matter of, yes,
they've been very critical of Israel.
They are politically driven.
Oh, I see. Okay, so you can't trust any of the human rights organizations?
I cannot trust any of the human rights organizations.
Dr. Al-Mulki, thank you very much indeed. Okay, we're going to now throw it open to the floor, and we're going to take your questions on the motion that Egypt is a disappointment to the rest of the Arab world. Lady in the third row.
I focus particularly on Jordan. I'm a researcher, so I was wondering, how does the failure of Egypt translate into Jordan, particularly the failure of the Muslim Brotherhood, because the Muslim Brotherhood is a credible opposition party here. And how does that create a space for what they call in academia NEEPs, new extreme alternative political parties, that are based on more religious fundamentalist grounds? I'd love your thoughts on that.
Okay, Manar Ashwani, would you like to comment on that?
Okay, I think here we can talk about the implications of what's happening in Egypt. Unfortunately, we see what happened in Egypt like an opportunity for others to talk about Muslim Brotherhood losing legitimacy, but with no alternative. This is a serious problem. This is what we see now in Egypt. And if some countries would like to say the same about any other country, not only Jordan, then this is a serious problem for the whole, for every Arab country. We need leaders of the society. We are not in need to see the collapse of every political party and every political movement. This is what we see now in Egypt. Now we started with the Muslim Brotherhood, and then we are moving to a secular movement like 6 April. It was supposed to be an opportunity, what we saw in Egypt.
But what about the implications for the Muslim Brotherhood here?
Yeah, of course.
In Jordan?
Of course, they feel, I cannot answer on behalf of them, but at the same time, they have this feeling that they are not strong. We noticed that they had this feeling that it's sooner or later they are the most important movement in the Arab world. It became, and now we cannot see.
And now they don't.
I think they have this feeling, still they have this feeling, but they cannot continue acting the same. We saw completely different behavior when Morsi was the president of Egypt.
Okay, all right.
They were more confident.
Let me just go to Dr. Al-Mulki for a moment. The government here is celebrating the overthrow of the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt?
No, I don't think so.
No? Clinking champagne glasses?
No. We won't go that far.
No.
But I would have to say the following, that the regime in Egypt, the Muslim Brotherhood regime, the group that ruled Egypt for that year, had delivered a strong blow to a good movement, in my opinion, with good intentions, 80 years of struggle of the Muslim Brotherhood. And I think they have the chance to remedy that. And they have the chance to come back and participate.
The chance here to remedy that. They don't seem to have much chance in Egypt.
No, they will. Ultimately, they will. It's just like what you asked about those that have been prosecuted. No, they will. Once the horizon clears and things go back to normal, I think Egypt is for everybody, and Egypt will be inclusive of all.
We'll take another question. Gentleman in the third row, please.
Do you think, sir, that the best thing happened in Egypt, that we have discovered the reality of the Muslim Brotherhood after 100 years, almost 100 years or 90 years, of saying that we have the solutions for everything. Islam is the only solution to all the problems of Egypt and the other Arab world. Don't you think that when they have the power, when the president and all of the cabinet was from their side, don't you think that we have discovered the reality of this organization? The people are working only for themselves, not for the people, not for the Egyptian people. And I think this is the best benefit we as the rest of the Arab countries we have.
You're saying you've seen the Muslim Brotherhood for who they really are, who you think they really
Exactly.
are.
Exactly.
No, actually, what I'm saying that we discovered the reality of all our political parties, the traditional parties, not only the Islamists, not only Muslim Brotherhood. Because if you talk about the failure of the Muslim Brotherhood, what I see, to be honest, before anybody else, the failure of our regimes, especially in Egypt. I don't know if we are talking about, we just discussed about this issue about poverty. 45% of the Egyptian people live on less than $2. This is one of the achievements of the regime. But what the alternative, and this is a very important question, instead of creating the alternative, the other political parties and movements in Egypt actually announced in way or another that we are not able to do anything. Please, army, go and intervene. We just want to be behind you. Alone, we cannot do anything. Even after 1 year of the failure.
You didn't ever answer what choice they had. What choice they had.
To be united and to address the people with real programs, not to work hard.
That would really have made a difference when the Muslim Brotherhood had taken all the power, they were appointing all the governors, and they put themselves above the law. A little chat in the street would have made a great deal of difference, wouldn't it?
Yes, but what I mean, it's about creating the strong society. I know the Muslim Brotherhood is the first to be blamed about what happened to the Egyptian revolution. But at the same time, it's not about positions. It's about creating strong society.
Okay.
Because anyone, it's like now Erdogan, he became dictator in a way or another because it's about society.
Let me ask Hani Al-Mulki, creating a strong society. Do you think people are ready for more political parties?
No, I will answer the gentleman directly. I want to assure you that the group that ruled Egypt during the Morsi time was greedy and did not represent the minimum of the thoughts and the programs of the Muslim Brotherhood. And I think that they delivered an extremely strong blow to that movement. So we should not judge the movement that struggled for 80 years with what they ruined in 1 year.
So you see that as an aberration, what happened in Egypt with the Muslim Brotherhood?
Yes.
Nothing to do with the movement here?
Nothing.
Shouldn't affect it?
It shouldn't.
They're a vital part of the political spectrum.
I think it shouldn't, as long as they abide with the general political rules that is acceptable to all people. They do not go to violence. They stay in line with the law.
Okay, lady there, you have a question.
Okay. The military supported Mubarak during his dictatorship, and the Egyptian people rose, and they ousted him. And then Morsi came. And then instability came, because revolutions, as Mr. Sebastian pointed out, take time. So how is a dictatorship by the military any different from when they supported Mubarak himself? Number one. And number two.
Well, let's just stay with that one, because that's a good question.
I didn't get what you wanted to say. Sorry.
How is this military rule that we have in Egypt at the moment different from Mubarak's rule?
Well, I don't think we have a military rule there. The military just responded to the revolution that never ended. The revolution of the 25th didn't end. It continued till the 30th. Now you have in Egypt a temporary president, you have a cabinet, and the army is on the sideline.
Really?
Exactly.
They make all the important decisions.
I don't think so. I don't think they make
Who gets killed in the streets, they decide that. Who gets put in the jails, they decide that.
It is the Minister of Interior, just like any other country. And putting the army there, the army is fighting a very important battle to save Sinai that the Muslim Brotherhood wanted to give away, and is serving an excellent job to save its borders from Libya that was fiasco by what had happened without the interference of the Arabs.
But they've just got to put thousands of people in jail without charge or trial in order to achieve those ends, have they?
Well, that you can claim that, but all
it's not me who claims it. It's all the human rights organizations within the country.
Whoever wants to claim that, he can claim it. But I don't think that people that are slaughtered in police stations, officers that are killed in the middle of the streets of Egypt, those killers should go uncharged and unpunished.
But excuse me, you cannot just release every member of Hosni Mubarak regime and then you send hundreds, and to put hundreds on trial for one soldier got killed. And in 15 minutes you sentence them to death.
Okay, I will ask you a question.
This is not about building a state.
Okay, I think I know Egypt. I want you to name the people that were from Mubarak's regime that were out of jail. Just name one person.
Ahmed Izz.
Ahmed Izz is out because the law says you cannot keep somebody in prison during a trial for more than 2 years. He is out. Yes, he is out, but he is under house prison.
But how can you, in 15 minutes, make everything clear after 15 minutes of hearing and say hundreds should be executed? But you cannot
I didn't say that.
No, the
I'm talking about the regime. I'm talking about the regime.
I did say that.
The Minya court did.
The Minya court is a primary court. They said that. Fine. We have to wait and see.
And does that seem to you like proper justice? Does that seem to you like acceptable justice?
Well, if you've seen
because the United Nations doesn't. They say it's outrageous.
Don't let me get into the United Nations and see where the justice stems from in the United Nations.
You're a former diplomat.
Yeah, that's why I don't want to get into that. All I am saying is the following, is people that commit a crime have to be punished. Now, if we agree that they have to be punished, all what we are disagreeing on is the level of punishment.
No, we're arguing about whether they get a fair trial. The question is, do they get a fair trial?
Just for you to know,
do they get a fair trial?
In principle, against execution. In principle, I am against that. But I am with the one who commits a crime has to be punished. And I would challenge you to go and watch and see the videos of the slaughtered army police officers, slaughtered. They threw on their faces sulfuric acid, and they killed a bride and her groom in front of the church, and they burnt churches, and they killed people in the middle of the streets. And all this is on video.
And you think these terrible crimes justify unfair trials?
No, they do not justify unfair trials, and there was no unfair trials.
So the UN is wrong, everybody's wrong.
There might be an unfair sentence, but there is no unfair trial.
No, defendants were not allowed to attend.
No, they
and
were.
The same about their lawyers.
No, they were.
And this is really bad for the image of Egypt. It's not about Muslim Brotherhood.
Well, I can assure you they attended.
And this is bad for trust in judiciary
attended.
System in Egypt also. Because you cannot trust judiciary system anymore in Egypt.
I can assure you that they attended. And I can assure you
How can you assure us they attended? Did you attend?
No, because we saw and we read. And there was
no reason. You don't know who was there?
Well, the defendants themselves said that they were defended. The defendants themselves, they said
half of them weren't even in the country, so how could they have been there?
They were not in the country?
No. They were sentenced in absentia, half of them.
Half of them. The other half said...
You said you knew they were there. Half of them weren't even in the country.
No, I know that. And by the way, when you're out of the country, you get the highest sentence, just for you to know. And that, if you're out of the country and you're sentenced, you get retrial.
All right, we're going to take a question from the gentleman in the second row.
You know, when you make reference, you were talking about the people who were in prison and were put on trial, you know, under this current regime in Egypt. And then you make, you know, interchangeably, you made references to the rule of law and you talk about legitimacy. How could that be if it's a coup d'etat? Because you had a freely elected president, okay, in Egypt. And then he's been overthrown in a coup d'etat.
Okay.
So whatever follows is illegal.
Okay, no. We have allow me to redefine what legitimacy is all about. Legitimacy is a contract between voters and their leaders. And the contract is based on two constraints. One is time, and one is delivery of deeds. If you violate one, legitimacy is null and void.
You think the coup was legitimate, do you?
There was no coup.
No.
There was a revolution. And I have to be very clear about that.
The army overthrew President Morsi. Did they or didn't they?
No, the army did not move out of their camps with empty streets in Cairo and overthrew the man. The army...
They just took power.
The army was responding to the demands of the people. 35 million people came out. And I want to reassure you again.
That's what they say during every army coup, don't they?
No, no. They didn't say that before, and they never said that before. And I want to tell you, the coups that you're talking about and the revolutions that you're talking about are completely different than what we saw in the Arab Spring.
But actually, even if we agreed that what happened in July 2013, but what happened later, if we agreed it's a revolution or the continuity of the revolution, but what happened later, every day we have a new evidence that it's a counter-revolution. And it brought back all the members of Hosni Mubarak. It saved the army not to be, nobody to talk about its wealth and how much it controlled, the portion it controlled of the Egyptian economy.
I don't think the army is the army of another country. It's the army of that country. That's number one. Number two, you allegedly said that they brought the regime, the Mubarak regime people back. I don't see any evidence. I don't see Hamdin Sabahi, who used to attack Mubarak every single day, is from the Mubarak's regime. Number three, I would want to refer to you to the court ruling that no one of the National Party of Mubarak is allowed to run for office. And that was a ruling 2 weeks ago. And I want to tell you one more thing, add one more thing. What we see in acceleration of reform in Morocco and Jordan, what we see in change of path in Tunisia, what we see in conciliation between Hamas and the PLO are all results of the 30th of June revolution.
Okay. We're going to take a question from the gentleman there. Yeah.
Do you think the revolutions or coup d'etat of the past 2 years have set a dangerous precedent in Egypt? So, for example, whenever the people come together and they're unhappy with the current government or regime, they just take to the streets and there's one revolution after another. Do you think that's just a dangerous precedent has been set?
I think this is possible. This is why I think the situation in Egypt is really disappointing. Simply because I'm afraid the next time the people will take to the street, now what we see now in Egypt, there's no reform at all. No reform. According to some reports also, corruption is higher now. And of course, the repression, violation of human rights. And people, even some regimes argue that people don't want democracy. They want better life, prosperity, etc. But this time, with no reform, and next time the people will take to the street, I'm afraid they will take to the street against the Egyptian army. This is the problem with Egypt. It's not about the Islamists, it's not about any other regime. If you are worried about...
Do you think people in the Arab world are increasingly prepared to trade freedom for prosperity, for security? Isn't security the #1 issue for people?
Yes.
Even well ahead of freedom.
Exactly, this is the idea. How can you achieve a prosperity without democracy, without at least some liberties? This is a serious problem.
China, they're managing
exactly,
in Russia.
it's China, and I think China also listened to some influential people to understand this society. What we saw in Egypt, Hosni Mubarak in his last days tried to control every part of the state, not the opposite. Even China tried to understand. I'm not saying full democracy, but what's happening right now, you want also to go back, and this is a so serious problem in Egypt, especially when you take a look who support Egypt in this. So this is so serious problem. They want to take the Arab people to back before 2011. And next time, people will remember. I think the Egyptians were so smart, they didn't mention that the army, they decided to avoid talking about the army in 2011, but everyone knows that the army controlled the Egyptian economy. Next time, not because they want democracy, because they want to get rid of poverty, of unemployment. They will point exactly to who really control the economy. And this is bad for everyone, for the nation, for the state of Egypt as a whole.
Okay. Hani al-Mulki, does it set a dangerous precedent?
Well,
these revolutions, or which you like to call them, and coups, which other people call them?
No, they call them coups because they don't know the difference between revolution and coup. But I will tell you one thing. Look, son, if the people are not happy and they go down to the street, the leader has to leave.
That's not democratic.
Even if they do that 100 times. The whole purpose of leadership is satisfy the basic needs and security of people. When 35% of the population say no, I think a leader should listen.
Okay, you want to come back briefly, and then I'm going to go to Nana Rashwani. Please, let me go back to the question.
And I want to...
Please, I need to hear from the question.
Okay, but what if in 1 year's time people are unhappy with the faith they've shown in Sisi, for example? Who's going to remove him then? Sisi had a continuous cycle, no?
No. It will not continue. If the leaders of any country cater to the human security of people and their demands, people will go to their own work. But you're mentioning Sisi. Sisi mentioned that 2 days ago. He said, if there was 30 million in the street coming against me, I will resign in a minute.
Okay, you believed him, did you?
But he refuses to allow 35 persons to take to the street these days.
Okay, take a gentleman in the third row.
Thank you. Tunisia, so far, is an inspiring model. My question to you, sir, why do you think the Egyptians didn't make the same choices as the Tunisian people? Thank you.
Okay, here I cannot say I'm expert on Tunis, but as I mentioned, Muslim Brotherhood thought it's for them a zero-sum game. And they decided to exclude everybody. Actually, I can say it's a harsh word, but they betrayed rebels. That's true. But at the same time, I think other political parties were not ready also to reach a settlement. The most important issue in the case of Egypt, and this is described many times, since the Free Officers' Revolution, the army will never accept a president not an officer, used to be an officer. This became so obvious. So I think the military is so strong, the military really involved in politics. The president since Nasser till Hosni Mubarak and now Sisi used to be officers. And at the same time, it's about economic interests. It's so important for the army. It's not something just to change the political leadership.
I keep hearing about army officers becoming presidents. If you can count, I'll count for you. You start with Eisenhower. You go to de Gaulle. You go to Rabin. You go to Ehud Barak. You go to Sharon. They're all army officers. And let me tell you, Eisenhower was one of the better, or one of the best. And Charles de Gaulle were the best. But to answer your question, Tunisia was about to face the same consequences of Egypt, have it not reformed after what they were intelligent enough to change path. They changed path so swiftly that they were able
Who is the they you're talking
about? The Tunisian. The Tunisian government, and you know, had made re-election.
You're talking about the Ennahda party.
Yes. They made the shift very quickly, and I think why...
When they stepped down from government.
Yes. Yeah. And that is one reason why I say Egypt was inspiring to the Arab world.
But when the opposition in Tunisia came against the Muslim parties taking all the power for themselves, they did not call the army to get involved and to take over the power. That's the difference.
So the fact that the army stayed out of it is the big difference.
The army stayed out of it, and the Tunisian parties were mature enough not to call for the intervention of the army into the politics.
I want to answer that. Because in Tunisia, It was political movement, and it wasn't mass movement of people. And that's why the army did not interfere.
We're going to a question over there. Gentleman there.
My question that you were saying it's by the people for the people, and the number of protests against the army is like the double.
So you're saying the people aren't satisfied? What's happening in Egypt is not what the people want? Is that what you're saying?
Exactly.
Come in on
Sometimes
this.
I don't understand. If we refuse to accept election in the case of Muslim Brotherhood, why now it's became the most important issue now in Egypt? And under such repression, how can you measure really the public will? How can we measure the situation in Egypt? If it's easy to be terrorist in case if you are close to Muslim Brotherhood, of course, if you are a member, definitely you are a terrorist, or in case you are secular, then you get the ready accusation that you are working with foreigners and to be accused with espionage.
Let him speak, please.
Okay, I'll let him speak.
We have here in this case, now under Morsi we were able, according of course to other political movements and the army, to talk about that the people don't want Morsi anymore after 1 year. But now people cannot take to the street. You are talking about 30% of the people can talk to the street against Morsi. But I asked, can 35 persons now take to the street against Sisi and anybody else? No, they are not allowed.
Well, we're not at that time, first of all. Second, Morsi, you talk about democracy. Morsi was given a full year, and the people waited on Morsi. Did you want them to wait until the Nile was dry, until Sina?
No. Let me make my point clear.
They gave him a full year. They gave him a full year. He came after 4 months, and made a constitutional announcement that took away from the independence of the Jewish system, that made his decision uncontestable. He came out and did that after 2 months, 3 months, and they waited. And they waited. They waited
and
till
now
the
people who were campaigning to vote no in the recent referendum were arrested by the army. You think that's fair?
I don't think anybody, there were international observers, and I didn't hear this. And we are to see next week. I didn't hear this. Probably some of you heard that the army is arresting people. The army has no jurisdiction in arresting
they
a single
arrest people. They take who they want.
No, they don't. That's the police.
But excuse me, Tim,
I
just want to make something so clear. It's not about Morsi. It's not about Muslim Brotherhood here. When we talk about, let's say it was completely right to remove Morsi, what happened then? What happened then? Did we create the environment to respect democracy and the human rights? Nobody can say yes.
Nobody can say
Sorry.
yes?
Nobody
What did you want them to remove Morsi the first day and the second day announce elections?
This is how we have the evidence to say that what's happening. Excuse me, but let me tell you. Let's say it's not Muslim Brotherhood. Let's say the liberals were the strongest political party. We're going to see the same. We're going to see the same because it's about saving the interest of people who got benefits from the old regime, not the opposite. It's not about...
I tell you, Hamdeen Sabahi got benefit from the old regime. I challenge you. I challenge you to tell me that Hamdeen Sabahi...
but Hamdeen Sabahi...
Okay, we're going to take...
he's a candidate.
All right, we're going to take a question. Can we have a microphone to the person in the front, please?
This was exactly my question. I always thought that would there be another mean to settle the dispute that happened in Egypt rather than what happened. I mean, we know the doctor said that, Dr. Morsi said that Morsi has been in power for 1 year. I don't know if this is enough to change the whole situation, but coming back, would there be other mean, like the House of Parliament, just to keep the democracy going in the Arab world? Would there be another mean to Morsi being out of power another way that we have seen?
After the 30th and the 30th of June and the 3rd of July, there was a future map drawn that had preparing for a new constitution, a constitution that limited the powers of the president, that separated between the executive and the judicial systems, as well as of the consultative, a new constitution that assured people their rights. And you want to tell me that after a year of Morsi, where he had major problems with Ethiopia, he had major problems with the rest of the Arab world, did the 90 million people have to wait?
Mana Rashwani.
I just want to say something about the text and the constitutions. If we want to take a look at the text, then we have the best constitutions in the Arab world in every country. It's not a problem. But sometimes, maybe you mentioned it quickly.
You're saying the constitutions are worthless, actually?
Exactly.
Unless
in the Arab
people
world,
abide
yes.
by them,
in the
they're
Arab
worthless.
world, yes. This is why I'm saying now we have a good constitution in Egypt, let's say excellent constitution in Egypt. Nevertheless, we see people arrested, thousands get arrested, mass trials,
the constitution
etc.
and the law.
But also, I'm sorry,
let
let me complete this.
You can come back in a minute.
You mentioned the problems with Ethiopia. Actually, this goes back to the era of Hosni Mubarak. Now suddenly we discovered that all the problems created by Muslim Brotherhood within 1 year, the Salafis, the problems with the Arab world, actually this problem with Egypt, with Ethiopia over the Nile, it's a long story, and actually Hosni Mubarak was the president and he kept silent. He couldn't say a word, and the opposition used this against him as enough evidence about the dignity of Egypt, how we are losing our dignity. So it's not related to Muslim Brotherhood. The Salaf is not related with Muslim Brotherhood. Attacks on church not related to Muslim Brotherhood. Maybe they agree with what's happening, but what really the cause go back at least 50 years.
Okay, Hosni Mubarak is well gone. Hosni Mubarak had a revolution against him. We are not comparing what's happening today with the Hosni Mubarak regime. You condemn the regime, I condemn the regime, all the Egyptians condemn the regime. We're talking about what's today. I think what Egypt had done in the last 3 months has been extremely important. It had proven to the Arab world that the Arab relations with regional non-Arab countries is essential for security. It initiated a dialogue with the African countries.
Okay, I'm going to move on. Gentleman over there in the check shirt, please. Yeah.
When you look at the situation now, how can Egypt go forward as a democracy, or how can it transition to being a full democracy if the army and protests are the only thing that is required to remove a leader from office?
Mama Rashwani.
Maybe this is the most important issue when we discussed about who is responsible for reaching this point. It's about really creating a strong society. It's about
How do you create a strong society? How does it move forward under current circumstances?
Under current circumstances, I think that forces or the political movements who supported the army in its coup in July supposed to step back and to start working on something, on a program, on something unite them.
Do you see any signs that they're doing that?
So far, unfortunately, I cannot see something like that. But the good thing that now we can, because of what happened in Egypt during the era of Muslim Brotherhood, and now, I think in the future, and I hope actually, not think, I hope we will see people understanding the new generation, learn the lesson. Learn the lesson. It's not about it changing Hosni Mubarak with the Muslim Brotherhood or changing Muslim Brotherhood with the army. We need to create really completely different alternative based on
and what if they're not allowed to create these new alternatives? What if the political space is so small that they can't build this unity that you're talking about?
This is the problem, I think. This is what I mentioned, that now 35 people not allowed to take to the street, and I insist that it's not about the Islamists, it's about anybody who can challenge the authority in Egypt or any other country, because it's now we can say about the Islamists they are terrorists, but we can use the same about espionage if they were secular. But this is a serious problem, and this is going to take time.
Hani Al-Mouki, how do you build a democracy in Egypt when no challenge is allowed to the political authorities?
Well,
when they dominate the media, when there's no free speech allowed, when journalists are jailed, left, right, and center. How do you build a democracy on that?
Well, I don't think what you're saying is true. If what you're saying is true, then you can't build a democracy. But that's not the case.
65 journalists have been detained since July the 3rd. 17 are still in jail.
Okay. 65 had been detained. 65 had been sent to court. 65
no, they haven't. Lots of them haven't been sent to court.
You cannot.
An Al Jazeera journalist has not seen either a court or a charge or a defense lawyer since last August when he was picked up.
I really don't take my news from Al Jazeera.
It's not news from Al Jazeera, it's about them. It's about them.
And I can assure you, that that is not true.
It's okay to do what you want with Al Jazeera, is it?
No, it's, Al Jazeera can claim whatever they want to claim. But again, I want to answer you, sir. The new constitution gives the ultimate power to the parliament, and that's democracy.
My disappointment with Egypt stems from the general or the consistent misunderstanding of what democracy actually is. And you see this with the Muslim Brotherhood, which won by a narrow margin of a few percent. And then so that gave them the mandate to do whatever they wanted. And then now, because 35 million people, which is not true, but came out and said, you know, we don't like the Muslim Brotherhood.
Why you counted them? It's not true.
Please.
No, I'm just asking
it's not. The issue is that real democracy is meant to protect the minority, not the majority. Whereas in Egypt, there's been a consistent belief that if the majority says something, that then gives mandate to do whatever you want to the minority. And I think that's the real problem. And I don't think Egypt will be able to build a lasting, true, you know, to the extent that's possible, democracy until that kind of idea.
Until it protects minorities.
Until the concept of democracy is actually understood in Egypt, which up until this point has proven to be misunderstood by any group that's been in power.
First of all, they do understand what democracy is all about. I assure you that from the beginning, from the time of Morsi's winning the elections, quote unquote, from that time till today, democracy is prevailing. That's number one. And number two, I assure you that Egypt is moving in the right direction.
Okay, all right. We are, ladies and gentlemen, going to vote on the motion in a minute. But before we do that, I'm going to ask each of our speakers to just say one sentence to crystallize their views before you go to the vote. One sentence. Mana Rashwani, just one sentence, please.
The situation in Egypt, definitely disappointing, but it can be an opportunity to learn the lesson from what happened and not to sacrifice our freedom in the name of fighting terrorism and Muslim Brotherhood.
Hani Al-Mouki, one sentence, please.
I would say that Egypt was aspiring to the Arab world. What happened in Egypt opens new hopes for the Arabs to move ahead and to find their own new ways and not to be afraid to speak their mind, and Egypt will turn to be a leader in this region.
Okay, all right. You've heard the views of our speakers. You've heard a wide-ranging selection of opinions. Now we're going to vote on the motion that Egypt is a disappointment to the rest of the Arab world. If you agree with that motion, would you please raise your hands? And if I can ask you to keep your hands raised. Just want to remind you that this debate is going to be shown on Deutsche Welle worldwide. The exact times and dates will be put on our website, so you're very welcome to follow along with the broadcast when it comes. And please do keep in touch with us via our website, www.newarabdebates.com. We're always glad to hear your views and opinions. Do we have the vote from everybody? We do have the vote. Okay, all right. Now, if you wish to vote against that motion, that Egypt is a disappointment to the rest of the Arab world, if you don't agree with that statement, please put your hands up now. And please keep them up. You have the vote? Okay, you can put your hands down. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for your patience. The result is in. 73% of you voted for the motion and 27% against. So the motion has been resoundingly carried. Let me just say that you voted the following way before the debate. 55% were in favor of the motion and 45 were against. So the side in favor has picked up 18% during the course of the vote. All that remains for me to do is to thank our distinguished speakers. Thank you very much for being here tonight. Thank you to you, the audience, for your questions. The new Arab debates will be back again, hopefully next month from the West Bank. Till then, from all of us on the program, have a safe journey home. Thanks for coming. Good night. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you.